I'm Julie Hurwitz, and I welcome all of you to the second of our very important conversations about the timely and critical topic of alternatives to policing. Before we get started with our presentations, we are inviting Shushanna Shakur to the microphone to share with us a very powerful poem that was written by Aneb Kgositsile, otherwise known to some of you as Dr. Gloria House. And Shushanna is a longtime Detroit activist, poet, and educator. And with that, Shushanna.
Thanks everyone for coming out tonight, and I bring revolutionary greetings on behalf of myself and also the Coalition for Police Transparency and Accountability. And we also finally call Dr. Gloria House. We call her Mama Aneb. They call our names. So many. We hold their names in the lump of tears we carry in our throats and cannot swallow, but taste the salt, falling asleep and waking, weeping and mourning, African bodies, ashes on 4 centuries old Hira of U.S. repression and state-supposed violence, sponsored violence. Our young sons and daughters preferred kindling thrown on every day. Keep the fire ablaze, exploding with terror. Call the names of these sacrifices. Dante Ray, Freddie Gray, Hakeem Littleton,
Adam Steele,
Alex Wayne, and W. Green.
Samir Rice, Adesha Miller.
Where were they headed that day? To see Auntie? To buy diapers for the baby? To take dinner to Grandpa Charles? Just hurry home from work? Just stroll down to the corner store? What were they longing for? What were they just about to do? Just about to say? What future were they dreaming? Alive on the other side, where everything swells with love? They call our names. They urge us on and tell us to believe in the inevitable unfolding of a new world. They tell us to keep on, to keep on, to keep on demanding justice. Thank you, Mama Aneb.
Powerful. Thank you, Shushanna. As you know, welcome. I want to just take a second to thank our organizational sponsors of this event, the National Lawyers Guild, the Coalition for Police Transparency and Accountability, the Michigan Coalition for Human Rights, and the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights. And thanks also to Wayne State and the Center for the amazing food and drink that was provided before the event. As I've introduced myself already, I'm Julie Hurwitz. I will be moderating our conversation this evening. And for those of you who attended our forum last December, welcome back. Last time we were here, Our amazing panelists shared with us their thoughtful and sophisticated perspectives on the history, nature, and culture of policing, along with an overview of what it means to support abolition, as well as short-term strategies that include working within the legislative arena and the courts. Tonight, we're going to hear from 4 more amazing activists, lawyers, academics, each of whom have been in the struggle for police accountability and/or alternatives to policing throughout their political, legal, and activist lives. I'm going to just take the time now to tell you about each one of our panelists, and then we'll be able to just go right into the presentations. Tawana Petty is a social justice organizer, poet, author, well-known throughout the Detroit area for her amazing work and creative contributions. She is the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Algorithmic League and a convening member for the Detroit Digital Justice Coalition since 2016. She is as well a founding director of Petty Propolis. Did I say that right? A Black women-led artist incubator, fostering and supporting young Black artists through poetry, literacy, and literature workshops, anti-racism facilitation, and social justice initiatives. And she has been awarded many awards, too lengthy to even go through tonight. Tawana is going to be speaking about the conflation between surveillance and safety, consent and coercion, as well as some of the ways carceral culture expands policing beyond the state. Lloyd Simpson is sitting over at the end here, is a PhD student in history at University of Michigan, whose research focuses on Black Marxism, the Black freedom struggle, and the carceral state. As part of his work, he has been focusing on policing as an extension of state power. Lloyd is also an active member of Detroit Will Breathe, was one of the hundreds of people who were arrested in the summer of 2020, and currently one of the few who are still being targeted by the city of Detroit for prosecution from those arrests, even though the criminal charges were dropped against him within the past few weeks. The city of Detroit is appealing that dismissal. They won't let go. Lloyd is going to be speaking about the work he's done in the past few years for the Carceral State Project as a graduate student at U of M. And he will talk briefly about the historical origins of police power in this country, 20th and 21st century police reform with an emphasis on Detroit, and what would constitute a credible alternative to contemporary policing. Nancy Parker, behind us on the screen, unfortunately is out of town at a conference, and thank you for joining us. Nancy is currently the managing attorney at Detroit Justice Center's movement lawyering practice. She is on the board of the National Lawyers Guild and was co-counsel with me and other people in this room in the successful Detroit Will Breathe litigation against the city of Detroit for the massive violations of the Constitution committed by the police department during those protests. I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with both DJC and with Nancy over the past 3 years, and I can't say my feelings of respect, awe, and admiration for her, I can't even put enough words to. So I will leave it with that. Thank you, Nancy, for being with us. Nancy will speak about her work as lead counsel in the legal challenge to the Detroit's infamous Shot Spotter program. Yet another example of police power being used in poor communities and communities of color that rather than alleviate crime and violence, instead use defective technology to further terrorize people. Tonight here also in the audience with Nancy is Ramis Wadood, an ACLU attorney and legal fellow, where he focuses on policing and immigrant rights litigation, and he will be available as well. Nancy is going to have to leave a little early, and he'll be available to answer questions. We also have in the audience John Philo, the executive director of the Sugar Law Center, who is also counsel on the ShotSpotter case. So we've got lots of experts on the ShotSpotter struggle in the city of Detroit here, can answer your questions. Alia Harvey-Quinn. Hi, it's great to see you. Alia has been a revolutionary activist since her birth, the daughter of Black Panthers, and now the founding executive director of Force Detroit, a solutions to gun violence and public health with a primary emphasis on community violence intervention, which will be the focus of her talk tonight. Alia has a long history in nonprofit leadership, more than 20 years, around the themes of justice, safety, positive youth development, coalition building, and redistributive resourcing. And all of this informs her perspective on the work she does to create alternative models for achieving the goals of public safety, community awareness, public health, and social and racial justice. Each panelist will give a short 6 to 8 minute overview statement of their views, perspectives, and strategies for achieving the goals of eradicating police power, violence, racism, and the systemic repression of entire populations of people. They will address the thorny topics. Can the police be reformed, or must the institution of policing be completely dismantled? We will then move into a more interactive conversation between and among our panelists to allow them to speak to one another and to you, to grapple with some of the difficult short-term and long-term strategic goals and possibilities regarding this issue. And then we will open the floor for questions and answers. So with that, I'm going to ask Lloyd to get us started.
Thank you, Julie. Welcome, everybody. It's good to be here. As Julie said, I'm a member of Detroit Will Breathe, an organization that has been advocating and fighting for legitimate alternatives to policing for 3 years, defund the police. But I'm also here as an historian. As Julie said, I work on the Carceral State Project at the University of Michigan in the history department, specifically in the Policing and Social Justice History Lab. And for the last couple of years, I've been studying the historical genealogy of policing in this country, and specifically the historical genealogy of policing in the city of Detroit. And so first I'd like to start with what is policing? What are the police? We often think we know because we've been inundated with propaganda for over a century about who the police are and what it is they actually do. And so the average person will probably tell you somewhere in the range of the police are here to provide public safety. This is not what they do. Policing historically in this country is derived from police power that is can be understood at the nexus of 3 historical processes: the dispossession of indigenous land, the enslavement of African Americans, and the repression of labor. And what do all of those historical processes have in common? Private property, okay? And exclusion, because private property necessitates exclusion. And so you have to understand that this is the foundation of police power. It is what animates police at their core, even if they don't know it. Because I'm sure many police officers go out in doing their job. They believe that what they're doing is public safety. But that, of course, is not the history we have. So, yeah, as I said, you know, this is internal to the logic of police power. There's, at this point, a long list of scholarship and work that has been done on this. And so now I just want to talk a little bit about reform in the 20th and 21st century. So initially in the early 20th century, the police acted more as electioneering agents. Okay, so they served specific political bosses for specific voting precincts. They had very, very overt political motives. And that would change around mid 20th century as they underwent a crisis of legitimacy, okay? Because they were seen as overtly political, they had to be separated from that. And so there was this movement for professionalization, okay? And so this is where you get the first iteration of this cycle of crisis and legitimacy. And also at this time in the early 20th century and kind of like the end of the 19th century, you're getting kind of the science of criminalization in terms of Blackness, okay? And so Khalil Gibran Muhammad, historian, has wrote a phenomenal text, The Condemnation of Blackness, and it basically explores how this comes to be, the criminalization of Blackness and how Blackness becomes associated with deviance, criminality, and violence. And so, so fast forward to the 1960s, we also often think of militarization of the police in the context of the drug war, but this is not how the militarization of the police began. The militarization of the police began as a response to uprisings, urban uprisings, hundreds of which that took place in the 1960s. And in fact, the first SWAT raid was not on a drug house. It was on the Black Panthers headquarters in 1969. That is the first time SWAT team is deployed in the United States. And so in the 1970s, you have a lot of reforms instituted, actually substantive reforms. You have a wave of Black mayors that come in to office in the 1970s, most notable of which Mayor Coleman Young, the greatest mayor in the history of Detroit. Unfortunately, that ain't saying much because we haven't had a lot of great mayors in this city, okay? And so Coleman Young came in, was elected largely on the energy of the anti-stress movement, the abolition of the Stop the Robberies, Enjoy Safe Streets, this covert decoy unit that was killing young Black people left and right in the city of Detroit. And that really pushed him over the edge. He did not win by much, but that is largely what ushered him into office. And that coalition, the anti-stress coalition, by the way, that was began by the left. The left started that. And then liberals came along, the Michigan Chronicle, a lot of Black middle-class civic leaders, they were actually initially not against stress. They wanted stress reformed, but they wanted stress around. But ultimately, Coleman Young came in and he honored his word. He abolished stress. He integrated the police department. He instituted community policing. We'll get to that in just a minute. But the reality is that while these reforms were substantive, they could not counter the very logic of police, which is why we find ourselves kind of confused when we see Black police officers exacting racist violence against Black working class citizens. Is because it cannot change, the race of the officer cannot change the nature of policing. Because policing is about order and property. It is not about public safety. And at the same time, you have the evisceration of social spending during this time. And the only way you can get federal dollars is through criminal justice and policing efforts. And so this is what brings us into the escalation of the drug war of the 1980s. And the reality is that Coleman Young had a lot of clout. He had a lot of clout going into the 80s. He had a lot of respect and he had a lot of faith from the citizens of Detroit. Much of that was warranted. But the reality is we get to 1992 and we have Malice Green, right? He's killed by Larry Nevers and Walter Budson. And one of them, I can't remember exactly which one, was actually a former stress officer. And that speaks to the reality of police power, is that police are protected and have been, and they're only becoming more protected as time goes by. And so in 1996, you have the establishment of Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality, which a lot of my research is on this organization, which was founded by Mama Aneb and a woman named Marge Parsons. And it was driven by people, everyday people in the city of Detroit, coming to the coalition with cases of police brutality and misconduct. And by now, Detroit, the Detroit Police Department is majority Black. It's a majority Black police department. In fact, Eugene Brown, who killed Lamar Grable in 1996, was a Black police officer, okay? And that didn't make a difference. That didn't make a difference. Oh, am I running? Okay, the time, yeah, the time. Okay, so in any case, the fact is that many of the reforms that the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality were calling for, those have never been realized. Why? Because police power is going to resist any reform, be it liberal or radical, that limits their power. That limits their power to do their job. And I would say this, police actually, if you understand what the job of the police is, they actually do it very, very well, okay? They protect a propertied hierarchy, a racialized propertied hierarchy, and working class Black people are at the bottom of that. They will always be at the bottom of that under racial capitalism. And so when we talk about legitimate alternatives to policing, anything that does not limit the power of police or draw on their resources that they use to perpetuate this racialized social order, social and economic order, is not a legitimate alternative to policing, and you should be questioning that.
Okay, thank you, Lloyd. I'm sure there will be a lot to talk about when we get into the conversation and the questions and answers. Tawana.
Ashe, thank you, Lloyd. And I do want to lift up the late, great Ron Scott, who took leadership of Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality and tried to institute peace zones for life as an alternative to policing. Our interactions with law enforcement began with surveillance. So we must also address the ways we have internalized carcerality as a system of safety. At this rate, even if the state-sanctioned system of policing were abolished or defunded to the point of near abolishment, many of us have internalized mechanisms of surveillance and dominance to such a degree that we would form alternatives to state-sanctioned policing that are eerily similar, targeting the same marginalized people and rendering almost identical types of punishment. We have not had the radical revolution of values that Dr. King pleaded for in the 1960s, and our critical thinking has been under assault for decades with propaganda and dominant negative narratives about Black, brown, indigenous, and poor white populations. We have been lured into a culture defined by wealthy white tech bros who have gamified the surveillance state, as Sophia Noble puts it, with the ramping up of things like ChatGPT, DALL-E 2, and other fun artificial intelligence systems. We rarely question why these technologies exist, what data are collected about us, who is going to own that data, what rules tech companies have in place regarding sharing our data with law enforcement, who law enforcement shares it with, and how long that data will be held. In Detroit, we have witnessed the ramping up of surveillance helicopters, drones, surveillance traffic cameras, Project Greenlight with facial recognition technologies, real-time crime centers, and gunshot detection systems that profess to create safety in our communities. Surveillance is not and has never been and never will be safety. Dr. Simone Brown, author of Dark Matters on the Surveillance of Blackness, talks about the 18th century lantern laws, where if a Black person was found outside of the presence of a white person, they would have to hold a lit candle lantern in front of their face so that they could be watched. I liken this type of surveillance to Project Greenlight, flashing green lights that ensure that our communities are watched at all times. We report about our suspicious characters in the neighborhood app and send photos of their images for circulation in the name of safety, essentially digital profiling. Our lack of interrogation of these systems has allowed the proliferation of a sort of panopticon of surveillance to surround us inside our homes, outside our homes, in the places we get medical attention, where we shop, where we receive education, where we organize and enjoy recreation. The IRS says scan your face. We go along with it with little resistance. Proposal P, a propaganda push against our rights to rewrite our city's constitution with the Detroiters' Bill of Rights that would increase the resources needed to access quality of life issues, remove our civilian oversight body from police precincts, and prevent former officers from serving on the body, afford us with affordable water, truly affordable housing, disability rights, and rights to recreation for our children and communities. Detroiters voted it down. Policing is not simply a person in blue who receives a paycheck from the government. It is the proliferation of the surveillance state. It is a mentality and a culture that will survive beyond abolition if we don't struggle against internalized carcerality. All the mechanisms that give this culture life. Campaigns like Green Chairs, Not Green Lights, Be Seen, Not Watched, Ron Scott's attempt at peace zones for life, and other programs that push us to restore our sense of community are our one and only true exit from a toxic culture of policing. This does not mean don't hold individual officers accountable. This does not mean do not defund police. This does not mean abolish police, but it also means that we could destroy that system today and replicate it almost immediately. In the words of Mama Joanne Watson, often repeated by Monica Lewis Patrick, it ain't our fault, but it is our fight. Our conditioning starts early. I was watching Paw Patrol. Anybody familiar with Paw Patrol? Literal little cartoon police, dogs and other animals that work tightly with the mayor to police their community. So I said to myself one day, I want to break from all this work. I work in ethics around artificial intelligence. I don't know if y'all can tell. And I said, let me turn on some cartoons. I turn on cartoons, Nickelodeon, go in the kitchen, make some lunch, come back out. And there's a whole episode on facial recognition. Paw Patrol, this is targeted to little bitty kids. And they're testing the algorithm. They're trying to see if they can fool it. Now, I'm gonna speak on this. I'm speaking about how serious that is, right? These are kids who are learning that facial recognition is a good tool for policing at probably ages 3 to 7. There are attorneys in this room right now who are fighting for the lives of Black men who were misidentified using facial recognition, one of which has suffered tremendously physical impairment since he was incarcerated in front of his young, small children. Another of which lost his job, his home, his vehicle, and just really had to rebuild his life because of facial recognition. And so the reason why I want to lift that up is because I am an abolitionist in training. I'm learning how to think about what our reality can be beyond policing. But I've taken on in my personal life the work of trying to raise our consciousness around all the ways that we have allowed the carceral system to invade us psychologically and in every aspect of our lives. And so if we don't struggle against all the forms of surveillance that police us, and we don't push back against the ways that we have started to leverage it against our community and our neighbors, then the system that we're trying to abolish will never be abolished. And so that's all I have to share for now. Thank you.
It's a perfect segue for our next speaker, Nancy Parker, who is going to share with us some of the details and struggles of the litigation around the shot spotter, what Tawana referred to as the, what did you call it?
The gunshot detection.
Gunshot
system.
detective systems. In Detroit, it's called Shot Spotter. And Nancy Parker, please, you're on.
Thank you, Julie. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you. I got to get a response. I can't hear the audience, but I can still feel you. I sincerely apologize for not being there in person. I hope my passion can still be conveyed via Zoom. So ShotSpotter, what is ShotSpotter? Let me tell you a little bit about what it is, how the community responded, and what we are doing. So ShotSpotter is what is called gunshot detection technology. It's gunshot detection surveillance, meaning it is audio surveillance. This technology works by, in the most layman language, it's microphones. They put microphones on top of buildings, on top of light posts, and it's 24/7 microphones. I don't know anything that can be more surveillance than constant recording of people, noises, sound, anything you can imagine. This is a constant recording. So this is a corporation based in California that has no interest in solving gun violence, has no interest in creating safety. It does have an interest in parading in Black criminality, in violence, quite honestly. They are profit driven, right? They have shareholders that need to see a ROI, return on their investments. And so they need crime in order to exist. So off rip, this is not a solution, nor is it a program or a company or institution, anything that we should be aligning ourselves with, because they do not have the same interests that we do. Okay. So in the city of Detroit, we learned last summer that through the use of ARPA funds, that our city was trying to use 7 million ARPA funds to expand ShotSpotter. Apparently in 2020, ShotSpotter was greenlit in 2 precincts, in 2 areas in the city, on the east side and the west side. The community, after Tawana's great efforts with, calling attention to Project Greenlight and facial recognition, community members spoke up and said, hey, y'all can't keep using this surveillance and this technology without our knowledge or approval. So you had ACLU leading the charge. We had community members getting behind. We need an ordinance. We need a community control over government input, right? Meaning over government surveillance, meaning the people would control which technology is used to surveil us. That got watered down into community input over government surveillance, which is what we have today. And so once the city was trying to re-up ShotSpotter for 7 million in ARPA funds, in addition to 1.5 million to extend the current ShotSpotter, community members said, hold up, folks have been struggling. We have been calling for resources, and you want to take our ARPA funds, that was COVID relief dollars, that's supposed to use to uplift the city, uplift the people, you want to give it to a California corporation that does not care a thing about the people of Detroit. What we saw were community members spring to action. A coalition was formed, the Stop ShotSpotter Detroit Coalition, with community members from all over, where we were all saying the same thing. This is not a good use of our money. Despite the fact that ShotSpotter does not work, and I'm using that as like a secondhand caveat, even though it could and should be the very first thing. But even if it worked, I would not want this technology. But it does not work. It professes itself to hear an alleged noise that it can now, through a secret algorithm that it does not reveal, that has not been peer tested, that has not been independently reviewed, through this algorithm that codes it in some form or fashion, gets sent to a center where a human being will make a judgment call. Then they route that to the police, who then show up in our communities, because don't be fooled, this is only in our communities, in Black and brown communities, and poor communities. The police are showing up armed, on high alert. We already know that interaction between Black folks and police cause violence and murder and harm. The best way for Black folks to stay safe, in my opinion, is to limit our interactions with the police. What ShotSpotter does is send cops into our communities on heightened alert. I have 2 little girls. At any moment in time, they could be playing on the sidewalk, and DPD could roll up because an alleged noise was categorized as gunshot, when in fact it was a car backfire or firecrackers or anything else. The technology does not work. And so we got together, we filed a lawsuit, Detroit Justice Center, the Sugar Law Center, Jack Schultz Law Firm, in consultation with the coalition members, because we want, as lawyers, we need to be serving the people. We need to be moving in a manner that serves the organizers and what they want to do and what our collective power is. And so we believe that through this lawsuit, we can, one, push back on the city, because not only are they ramming down technology that is expensive and ineffective, they are doing so in a manner that is a slap in the face to the people. We put laws on the books for a reason. People rallied and fought for the Kiosk Ordinance. And the city of Detroit said, we don't give 2 snaps about what you fought for, what this ordinance says. We can still do what we want. The city of Detroit's lawyer got on oral arguments and said, it does not matter whether we comply with the law. City council has the ability to approve any procurement that we put forth. That should be shocking to every resident, to any human being that is listening tonight. That therefore means that Detroit is an authoritarian state, that the folks that we elected can ignore the laws when it serves them, when they have an ulterior motive to line their pockets and push agendas that do not serve the people. So we filed the lawsuit, we pushed back. Today we got a ruling that the judge says, residents, you are empowered, I applaud you, you have standing, you have the ability to demand accountability from your lawmakers. At the same time, the judge said, now we know the city did not comply, but we're gonna say that they complied substantially enough that we will allow ShotSpotter to move forward. While that is very much disheartening and deflating, it does not mean the fight is over, and it does not mean that we cry. It means that we continue to fight and push back, because when we were saying no to ShotSpotter, we were telling the city exactly what we wanted. Instead of $8.5 million going to a California-based corporation that profits in the violence against Black bodies, we want money for trainings, for an unarmed response team. I'm working with our great brothers and sisters out in Washtenaw County, helping them put together and form the Washtenaw County Care-Based Safety Team. If Ann Arbor can have that, Detroit desperately can have that. We need that. We can think of other ways to keep each other safe and to be in relationship with each other. And it should not be borne on nonprofits to figure this out. We have elected these officials to do the work of keeping us safe. And the bare minimum they can do is listen to us. If we have an unarmed response team, how many family members would be saved? How many lives would not have been lost because DPD is running out there, guns ablazing, fearing their lives and their safety, regardless of the color of the skin, from Black community members? That is a slap in the face. And if you are scared of me and the color of my skin, you need another profession. And in fact, you all need another profession, because we can figure out how we keep each other safe. So before we get to abolition, there's things that we can be doing now. We can get conflict de-escalation training, mediation training, trained in circle processes. Use that money to train the community members. So when someone is having a mental health crisis, we can send in the mental health responders who are not DPD folks, who do not have a gun on their badge. There are myriad of ways. We are creative, intelligent, dynamic people that have radical imagination to think bigger than the condition that we are currently living in. Yes, we know propaganda starts from childhood. We do not let our little girls watch anything that involves the police, but it's still all around them. We all had Officer Friendly come into the schools, right? Giving us ice cream, go to the friendly cop. No, I teach my girls, you do not go to the cops whatsoever. Our skin has given them a license to kill us, and I will not partake in any conversations, in any reform efforts, in any social entrepreneur efforts that works with the people whose sole mission, as Lloyd said, is to protect property over human beings. And so I'm here today to tell people we need to let go and divorce from that cop that is in our heart and the cop that is in our head. I am descendants of people who were born into a servitude condition, and they thought bigger than what they could see. And they believed that there was another future that their ancestors could live in. And I believe that I am doing this generational work because there is another future that my ancestors can live that does not involve cops. Thank you. And Julie, I apologize if you were giving me a time sign, couldn't see it. And I'm too passionate to stop, even if I did.
I didn't know how to tell you. Alia.
Yeah. Very, very happy to be here today. Thank you all for inviting me. Such a rich conversation already. We focus at Forest Detroit mainly on community-driven solutions. And so that's what I will be talking about today. Our goal is to build a freer and safer Detroit and to work in coalition, to work in dynamic partnership in order to drive that. And here are some of our challenges. I'm gonna talk a little bit about our understanding of community safety issues, our concerns about police a little bit in the beginning. I'm gonna talk about how we started, and I'm gonna talk about our current vision for expanding community-led safety work in Detroit. First of all, I think when you look at the sheer capacity of organizing that is subsidized by police, it's daunting. I think if we accurately or honestly assess the situation, many of the community police are able to organize not only our neighborhoods, but the grassroots community groups that are leading community violence prevention efforts at a staggering and amazing rate. It is absolutely daunting. The only way we can be in sort of dynamic conversations like this is to be in relationship with each other in Detroit. So like in the shot stopper hearings at the city council level, what was amazing to me is that I kept hearing communities saying like, we want to see community-led efforts, community-driven efforts that forge safety forward. We want to see community drive safety efforts, right? And then the person after person after person that was testifying that they wanted to see ShotStopper was leading a community-driven safety effort. It was a failure to communicate on an organizing level. Everybody in this field believes that they are doing good community-driven safety work. Everybody believes in both freedom and safety and not having to choose between the two, right? And so when we fail to be in communication, we fail, I think, in a dynamic way to seize an opportunity like the one that presented itself at the city council level. So being out-organized by the police in Detroit is something that we have to reconcile with if we are taking this work seriously. Another issue is that community members are asking for more police. And I think we've got to be honest and take a hard look at what community members who feel fragile, who feel like they are unable to support themselves and find safety in their communities. Like, we've got to be honest about that experience, and we've got to begin to organize at the community, house by house, knocking on door level, so that we're increasing safety in relationship and proximity to each other, like Tawana suggested. So we started by doing that. We launched a survey. We surveyed about 1,200 Detroiters to find out just like what safety sentiments were. We also started by building coalition. We were working with, a number of groups, New Era Detroit, the People's Action. We worked with USEF. I mean, the question was just like, what are the models? What are the thoughts of the leaders that already are existing in Detroit? How do we work together towards solutions? We also did a lot of traveling to visit spaces around the country where communities were successfully driving, safety. So the issue of or the opportunity that community violence intervention represents emerged really, really quickly. We were able to learn about ceasefires model in Oakland, which has reduced violence between 50 and 60% over the last 7 years in Oakland. It's implemented differently in Oakland than it is in in Detroit. In Oakland, community teams get a list of incidents that have happened in community, mostly violent, gun related incidents. And then they organize within their teams, who knows who? How do we go heal and restore community? Who from our faith community can pray with this family who has lost a loved one? Who can support the little brother of someone who was gunned down? And so in this way, they work to wrap around communities that have been affected by violence. They work to identify people who were likely to engage cycles of retaliation, and they supported them with robust resources, offering jobs, mental health, engagement by faith community is substantial if you're grieving, right? Like, if you have nowhere else to go, you've lost your loved one, what other thing can comfort you other than hope from a higher power, right? And so we traveled and we saw this model working in several different places. We were able to see the work of the Institute for Nonviolence, Chicago, Ready Chicago. We were able to see Erica Ford's work in New York, several organizations, take tips. And last year, we released a goal to advocate for $150 million over 10 years to establish 12 community violence intervention sites across the city. We want to support violence intervention, which is essentially when people who are at the center of violence but transformed, they leverage their relationships and their networks that they were once in to support people to make a positive decision. Much like if you're out with your friend late at night and y'all are drinking and you snatch their car keys. Community violence intervention works in much the same way. Then there are also street outreach, there's victim advocacy, there are faith-based partners that contribute especially to grieving families. There's wraparound supports, cognitive behavioral therapy becomes huge. I mean, I think at Force Detroit, we are much, much more interested in thinking about the power that we do have in community, that we can leverage in community to prevent an incident of violence before it happens. And we're much more interested in thinking about this work in terms of healing the trauma that causes violence in the first place. When you start digging into the stories of people who are at the center of violence, what you find is cycles of poverty. What you find is drug use. You find abandonment. You find all of these like core traumas that really belong in more of a mental health space, a basic needs space, all these other spaces. And, you know, violence is the response to those, you know, core triggers. So,
Thank you to all four of you. And each one of you have a very unique and important message to convey, and you've done that. What I want to try to do now is throw some questions out to the four of you to have you begin to talk to one another about some of the overlaps between your messages and the work you do, and some of the differences between your messages and the work that you do. So I'm just going to throw, I actually am intrigued by, Alia, the point you made about how we are being out-organized by the police. That is a really disconcerting reality.
yeah.
And I'd like to hear what all of you have to say about this phenomenon of how do we in the streets and in the courts and in wherever we are struggling contend with the resources and the power that the institution of the police have to control the narrative, control the message, and basically convince people to believe in a philosophy that is so clearly against their own interests. So who wants to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to add to that. So I released a report, we at Force Detroit, January 2022. And in this report, we indict ceasefire for generally just doing a bad job and being inconsistent with the models that we've studied, with the core facets of the models that we've studied from across the country. Like, because there's such a big difference in the rigor that drives results and the way the model works in Detroit, there's no way that we're getting the kind of results that they should have been getting. And I'm gonna tell you, the system is, the policing system specifically in Detroit is a huge monster, right? But when we released our report, it got all the way to the White House. We were able to change state legislation. Politicians were talking everywhere. They felt bullied by Force Detroit. This little 5-person organization. Everybody had locks or wore head wraps. Black folks speaking slang. And they were pulling me into a room saying, Alia, you got a lot of power. I mean, the mayor was going to national forums and saying things like, I hear some people don't like ceasefire. So it's amazing how much power we can drum up with a well-written piece of documentation. I'm sure Tawana can speak to that.
I was gonna ask if it was your fault, Department of Justice came out with that report saying ceasefire didn't work.
Oh, but you took it in.
But I mean, it was powerful. I saw a lot of backpedaling when that report came out because Department of Justice is law enforcement, right? And they came out and said ceasefire did not work and Project Greenlight, really. And so, you know, things we all knew, but that report came out.
Still are ongoing.
Right, still ongoing. Oh, yeah. Well, the chief said that they're not, the data they're using isn't, well, anyway. With regard to the narrative work, I mean, I say this all the time till I'm blue in the face. We live in a city, if just to name Detroit particularly, we live in a city that has been inundated with a half-century of propaganda assault. So I'm 46 years old, and for my entire life, with the exception of the Duggan administration, Detroit has been under this narrative of Black, hopeless, helpless, non-contributory residents who don't care about where they live or their property, full of crime, just the core indignity of the way we have been narrated about since the election of Coleman Young. And so, you know, it's only those the Duggan years where it's like, well, you know what? Actually, Detroit is coming back. Did you notice? And really, every time I hear Detroit is coming back, I hear Make America Great Again. I don't see the difference. And so, so that narrative coupled with the propaganda, the decades of law and order, the Paw Patrol, and all the other mechanisms that have been put in place for us to see policing as our end all be all to safety, have a real powerful impact on the ways not only that we see each other, but the ways other people see us and the ways policy is pushed or pushed forward in Detroit. And I'll finally say, I mean, I saw it really, really viscerally with Proposal P in Detroiters' Bill of Rights. You couldn't look at a film on Netflix without an ad saying Proposal P is a problem. I mean, I don't care. You could be in there were people in other states saying they got an ad when they signed into Netflix, Hulu, all these other. So it was everywhere. It was on billboards in other cities. And so the campaign to push us down and have us swallow our vision for ourselves and society is very well funded. And so like Alia said, we're going to have to, I just thought about that. Someone asked me to give you a text and I said, I don't have her number. So that was a rude awakening. You know, we do have to be in conversation with each other and we have to figure out how our works intersects. We don't always have the same path, but we have the similar goals. And as long as our principles and values are aligned, we should be able to work together.
Question into the hopper, Lloyd,
Yeah, go
for
ahead.
you to address. In
Julie.
addition to the question I just threw out there, and that is in the context of the other point that I thought Alia made that's very worth talking about, which is there are a lot of people in this city who are asking for more police. A lot of people who are victims of police are asking for more police. And that in sort of conjunction with the vision for a post-abolition society that we can talk about and organize around, how do we get from here, you know, within that, the context of this reality, And also the point that Tawana made about unless we really grapple, at least what I heard you say, unless we really grapple with the totality of what policing really is, not just the cops in blue on the street with their guns and the institution of policing, but the whole technology around it and the way it has pervaded our lives. How do we get from here to there? I guess that's in 2
Very
minutes.
big question, Julie, but I'll do what I can. First of all, I agree with Tawana that policing and surveillance is omnipresent in our life and it's growing. Police power is like cancer, really. Once it corrupts cells, it spreads to other parts of the body, and that's exactly what you're seeing. And I think to the notion that people are calling for more police, well, when you've been starved of material resources, which, by the way, belong to you, tax dollars that belong to you, that go to private developers, that go to people like Dan Gilbert and the Illich Group, and you are left with nothing. And left to deal with, there's violence in the community. There's interpersonal violence. Yes, that's real, and that all has root causes. And the problem is that it always comes, well, we have an immediate need. We have to stop this violence right now. And later on, we're going to get to those root causes someday. Well, they've been saying that shit for 100 years. Fuck that shit. How about we do this? How about we start with what Tristan Taylor has been saying for 3 years? Robust city-funded public housing. Emergency services that are not connected to the police, including mental health services, okay? And also public employment through the city, right out the police budget. Because the truth is that a lot of that violence can be traced to economic disparities that exist in these communities. And we have not seriously dealt with that. So of course, people are desperate for a solution. They've been told for all this time, like Tawana said, for 50 years, that police is the solution. They eviscerated the social welfare state, left people with no other option, and including, Black administrators, city officials, Coleman Young. He didn't, he could have made different choices, but he was also between a rock and a hard place in terms of resources coming for these kinds of things. And so I think when we talk about, community members, people in the community saying, we want more police, I think that the answer to that question is like, what if you had money for housing? What if you had money for mental health services? What if your nephew and your grandson had a job that paid him $35 an hour, okay, with health insurance and benefits? And opportunity for advancement. And that always comes later. But right now we get the police. And so that's got to change. We got to change our priorities.
All right, I gotta jump in here. I gotta
The mic to you right now to address these questions. And to add to that, the point you made about your kids and about the myth that we all grew up with, a policeman is your friend. And how does that sort of tie into everything else that people have been commenting on here this evening?
Absolutely. So first, let me just say that I really wish I was in person. It's like double judge. I'm trying to jump in, I can't get it. First, let me just say that I sincere apologies. I'm going to have to hop off after these remarks right here. There's another engagement that I'm late for. But I have to offer this. If I give my kids macaroni and cheese from the day they were born for a decade, and then I ask them the following day, what do you want for dinner? How can I expect them to say anything else but macaroni and cheese? This is literally all they have known and all that I have ever given them for their hunger is one offering. It is so disingenuous to me when I hear elected officials, when I engage in conversation and people say, but I asked so-and-so what they wanted and they told me they wanted more police. Therefore, I have to throw a third of the city of Detroit's budget to DPD. That is asinine. That is literally the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. My mind is blown. As an abolitionist, I'm looked at as the wild one, as the utopic one, that I'm making this fairy tale up. And I'm looking at the rest of the city, world, country. You have been doing the same thing for a century, and you have gotten piss poor results. So if the elderly lady is telling me that she wants police, I, as a concerned citizen, as someone who really wants to solve this issue, I know that throwing more police will not solve it, because we have tried that. If it worked, we would not even be engaging in this conversation tonight. It does not work. Stop it. Think differently. I will sit down with the elderly lady and say, tell me, what is your concern? Is it that you can't get into your house at night because the corner boys are loud selling drugs? Is it that there's no recreation for the kids, so they mill in the street and do things? Is that people keep breaking into your car because they don't have money to eat? So before I come to you and ask you what it is that you need, I already know the conditions in which people are living in. Why am I asking you when I have done nothing to alleviate the current dire situation that people are in? I'm going to ignore everything that my eyes see. I'm going to ignore the lack of infrastructure. I'm going to ignore the lack of transportation. I'm going to ignore the lack of equitable housing. I'm going to ignore the lack of job creation in the city and just blanketly ask you, what do you need to feel safe? And then when you tell me the only thing that I have ever offered to you as an option, I run with that. That is lazy. That is lazy. I challenge everyone here to have real conversations. When someone says they want more police, I don't disregard what they're saying. I ask them, tell me what it is that you want police to do. Tell me what it is the police are doing for you now. If they're not currently addressing your situation, let's think about that critically. Will additional more manpower with guns and other weapons, will that solve your issue? Or do you actually want to feel safe because you want your street lights on? You want the children in school. You want to know that your neighbor has running water, that Monica Lewis Patrick and the water warriors aren't delivering water to your neighbor's house because they can't wash their hands during a pandemic. You think someone living in that condition will not result to crime for survival? But I'm supposed to just ask you what you want to be safe and give you police because you said police. That is lazy. We are not lazy people. So with that, I challenge everyone here to continue to have these conversations, but continue to think critically. Analyze what people are saying. Go on a deeper level. If someone is saying that they want police or they want ShotSpotter, why? What am I hearing? I'm hearing you say you don't want your family member, your neighbor, your friends to be shot. ShotSpotter can't give you that. So how are we on opposite sides here? Right. We really need to be discussing this very complex situation that is complex intentionally so by our current society and how it is structured to keep us in place, to keep us divided. We just need to think more critically, y'all. And again, sincere apologies for having to hop off.
Thank you so much, Nancy. We miss having you here. Can't wait till you come back.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone.
I'm gonna take an opportunity.
Julie, hold on just real quick. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Because I want to speak to something that Nancy said. Nancy talked about that big old police budget, third of city resources. And the reality is that actually Detroit has a lot of police. They have more funding for the police department than 80%, more funding per capita than 80% of major metropolitan police departments, okay? You have more officers per capita than 93% of major metropolitan police departments. And then you know, and the common narrative is like, where are all the police? Detroit actually has plenty of police.
They're just not working for the people in the city of Detroit. They're working for Dan Gilbert. They're working for the Illich Group. They're working for the well-to-do. Okay, and so Nancy's right, it hasn't worked. But the police have gotten all the money, all the resources, and they have a terrible track record. Absolutely terrible track record. And this new, Duggan announced that $10 million grant for violence intervention, right? And whoever wins the grant, they get $700,000 over 2 years for a year for 2 years. For 2 years, but they have 2 years to prove that their violence intervention program works. But how long has the police had to prove that they are an institution that has the public interest in mind? How long?
Alia, do you want to speak to this grant question?
It's such a slap in the face. I mean, we fought for that grant and they named it Shot Stopper, which is a political tool to just overlay this initiative on top of the political dissent from Shot Spotter, clearly. I'm embarrassed that they named it that and that they named it that at the insistence of local activists.
I want to shift the conversation here to another question. And unfortunately, Nancy had to leave, but John and Ramis are here. And there are also several other people in this room who have used a strategy of using the courts to try to confront and address some of these issues. And I'd like to hear from you guys and from you three here how you see the sort of relationship strategically between using the courts in the form of offensive litigation, challenging unlawful, immoral, unconstitutional police act, funding, or representing victims of police misconduct, which I and my partner Bill Goodman have been doing for the last 40 plus years. To try to challenge and confront unconstitutional policing, both on an individual and a municipal-wide level. So how do you all see, especially, I'm sorry it's a long question, but especially in the face of today's decision from the court on the ShotSpotter litigation. So maybe we can start with Ramis and John. Ramis, why don't you come on up here because you can take me. Oh, we have a microphone. Good, thank you, Carrie.
I'll bring it on there.
So we're going to hear from the lawyers, but then we're going to hear from the activists.
I'll go first. And this is just free flowing, but realistically, we're not naive enough to believe that the courts are any sort of silver bullet solution to anything. In my view, at least, what you're doing is it's part of the puzzle, right? It's part of a forum and a tool for agitation. It can be a tool for assisting in on the ground organizing. And in the ShotSpotter case, it's a tool for letting the courts know their inadequacies, getting them to expose their hypocrisies, and giving them the opportunity to do what's right. But when they don't do what's right, it's an organizing tool to show what's wrong. I thought one of the beautiful moments in the argument, at least initially, because we initially went to court, we had the arguments. The judge was prepared to rule against us, no question about it, right? But we wouldn't let it end, and we wouldn't go easily. And he started to think. And the city's attorney, which they always throw this stupid line out, right? You got to sit there and listen to it. Well, if the people don't like it, they can vote somebody else in, or they can vote in people to pass legislation. And we pounded on that. That's exactly what people did. It's exactly what they did when they adopted that ordinance. They exactly did that. And the only person to stop them from saying, oh, we don't have to listen to you people, in any context is you, Judge. Literally you. Now, that's when things started to turn, at least in some respects, because then the city, of course, said that's other, just so insulting, right? Is that city council can do whatever it wants. It can sanction anything, even if it's against the ordinance and even if it's against the charter. And the judge said, whoa, at that point, it kind of, the light went off in his mind. And he said, no, they can't. And this is actually my role, is to stop you from doing that. Now he didn't go far enough, and there's limitations to anything, but at least that's where I see the role, particularly of working within the courts. It's not, it's not going to save us, right? We have to save ourselves. Courts aren't going to save us, but it can operate as an organizing tool. It can lessen the injustice for individuals, and it can provide some opportunities to institutionalize a moral outcome. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, doesn't happen every time, doesn't happen often enough, but that's where at least I see the role in the courts.
No, I didn't. You covered it all. I mean, I agree completely.
I will say also, I believe the ACLU is another organization that was participating in this lawsuit, right?
We weren't formally a member
Oh, you
of,
weren't.
of the
Okay.
legal team, but yeah, we worked behind the scenes with the legal team. I'm here as an employee of the ACLU, but first and foremost, a member of the Nancy Parker fan club. I'll just say I agree with John completely. Like I spend most of my day suing the police department, but I am under no impression that we can sue the police out of existence. At best, legal tools or just that, they're tools. And I think John's work in the ShotSpotter lawsuit, Nancy's work in the ShotSpotter lawsuit really just highlights how we have to be careful in the way we use those tools. Because if you think about the courts, it's so deeply connected to the police in terms of state power. If you think about like the criminal punishment system, it's literally the same pipeline, right? Every prosecution starts with the police and ends with the judge handing down a decision. And so we really have to be careful in the way we use this tool of litigation, of going to court. And I think John and Nancy really highlight how to do that in a way that takes direction from people who are really going to be impacted by the judge's decisions. And really, for a case like the ShotSpotter case, your average lawyer would go in and say, the city violated the ordinance in XYZ ways. But I think what John did a really good job of is not only doing that, but really putting the police department on trial and saying, this is what the city is out there doing. And that's why those violations are so important. The violations exist, but really let me spend this time and tell you, like, just show you the reality of what the police department's out there doing. And that, serves the purpose of trying to win the lawsuit, but it also really energizes everybody who's out there watching, everybody's out there who's going to be affected by the case, and really just builds this public tool for, win or lose. Now this is part of the public conversation even more. And we can use that outside of the courts, regardless of the judge's decision, because we know even if the judge rules in our favor, that's not the end of the fight. We can use that lawsuit as a tool for further organizing and further building that movement.
So what do you three have to say, if anything, in response to this?
I mean, I'll say some stuff about lawyers real quick. Love the NLG. They keep me out of jail. So great work there. But also, I mean, just, not related to ShotSpotter, but we have here the venerable David Robinson, who has actually successfully held the city to account for cases of police brutality and misconduct over decades. All right. And so that is an important tool because it's one of the only ways we've been able to successfully hold officers accountable. So David Robinson, he represented Arnetta Grable in the case in a civil suit against the city, and has represented many
many citizens who have been violated by the police. And the thing is that money talks, you know, and between 2010 and 2019, the city of Detroit had to pay out somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to somewhere between 50 and $60 million in misconduct suits. And that's a lot of money. And that isn't that over roughly a decade. And that's a lot of money for a city of Detroit size and resources. And that speaks to people. That speaks to people. And I think we need to talk about that more, is that roughly in that time, that's $6 million a year, something like that. I'm not great at math. I'm a historian. Okay. But it's a lot of money. And that is one way that I see. And also, you know, we had a little lawsuit with the city, little one that didn't work out too well for them. And that's important. I mean, that is, you know, it is a tool. And I think it's an effective tool. And I think that that's something that we've got to keep pursuing. And we also got to like speak about that. And let people know that yes, the city and the police department keep throwing money at this to cover up the bullshit that these police are on. And so I think that's a very important tool. I know that doesn't speak to ShotSpotter, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say yes.
Speak. I just want to make do a time check here. I was hoping we would move into the Q&A from
We can do that.
the room by 8 o'clock.
It's 8 o'clock.
It's just beginning to be 8 o'clock. So what I'd like to do, I do have one more question I want to throw to the four of you, or now there's 5 of you.
Okay.
But I want to
just do
give
the
both of you
question
an
then. What's the
opportunity to
question?
speak to this question if you want to. What?
I can wait for the next question.
Alia?
Oh,
Yep.
sure. I think it's a really, really important tool. Using the legal system as a means for combating police brutality or police offense. I think, first of all, it is documentable in a way that most other sort of efforts might not be, and it legitimizes and substantiates the claim, which allows us to escalate our organizing efforts even to like a federal level. I just think it's a really, really important tool. I think it works symbiotically with opportunities like your tool does things that we can't do. And I think ultimately when we work together on these efforts, we can reduce the weight that our community puts on police, the necessity for police, so that we can decide what we're gonna do there.
I will make one comment to all of this. The work, and I apologize, David, I definitely should have acknowledged you earlier. David Robinson, one of the stellar civil rights lawyers in the city. Thank you. I will mention on the question of using litigation, it seems to me from my experience, one of the most important tools that can and should be used that is frequently not is exposure, public exposure, educating the community about the realities of how policing really works in the lives of people in the community. And Bill and I have a case right now. We just got a decision from the court where a federal 58-page opinion in which it is a complete reality that the Detroit Police Department operates as systematically to completely not hold any of their officers accountable, even when they're caught lying, cheating, shooting, beating people up, falsely arresting people, racially abusing people. over and over and over again. They get investigated, they're told that they've committed a violation of departmental policy, and they never, ever, ever get disciplined, terminated, or sanctioned in any way. And it's an ongoing phenomenon within this department that has been going on for decades. And we now have this document that proves it, and no one knows about it because the press is not interested in covering it or in publicizing it. And so one of our tasks and the tasks of organizers is to be on top of that, I think, and really use it for the power that it can possibly wield for as an organizing tool. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth here. So where do we go from here? I'd like to hear each of you within 1 or 2 minutes each, for our panelists here, where do we go from here? How do we get from here to there? Alia.
I think we have to begin to assemble community safety teams, drive our own safety. We've got to figure out how to fund it, how to make the work holistic, how to make the work as community driven as possible. We've got to build relationships where there aren't any. We've got to trust the people at the center of violence who have transformed to work within their communities to stop violence. We've got to support that sort of gritty indigenous leadership in Black and Brown community. And then I think we have to connect it holistically to our long-term traditions that have healed us, ancestral work or whatever our spiritual traditions are.
Tawana, 1 to 2 minutes.
Ashe. Yeah, and I'll say we have to tackle the narrative. The narrative is the most premier way that you get a groundswell of community members who know what's going on with these systems. Law enforcement is not transparent. Media is leaning to one side of the equation. City government is in lockstep with the policies that have been so pervasive and violent. It's going to take our voices being amplified, creating our own mechanisms of narrative generation, like Riverwise Magazine as an example, and helping to resource tools like that get to the doors of the community members who are not getting the full picture. And finally, I'll say, the places like the civilian oversight body, the Board of Police Commissioners, it's mind-numbing attending those spaces. However, we don't attend those spaces to sway the minds of people who are already bought and sold. We attend those spaces to politicize the public, similarly to when you go before the court. Sometimes the audience is not, most times the audience is not the legislator or the city government official. It's the community that's only getting one side of the story, because when we're not there, they're only hearing law enforcement's version of things. And so we have to show up in those spaces, and we have to amplify what our narrative is about the policies and the ways we're experiencing the city.
Lloyd, 1 to 2 minutes.
Yeah, so real quick, fuck the police. And I don't say that as just like a provocative statement. I say that as a political grounding, because that tells me a lot about how interested a person or an organization or a group of people are in a true alternative to policing. And it's got to start there. And it has a material basis. And the reality is that community organizations cannot, nonprofit organizations, they will never independently have the resources for the type of structural change that we need. The state and capital have the resources that belong to us. And we have to organize to take possession of those resources, bit by bit, day by day, year by year, because that's what's going to take to get from where we're at
a society in which Black and brown and working class people are over policed and under resourced, to a society where people actually have citizenship, because that's what we're talking about. Police are patrolling the bounds of actual citizenship, and that is being denied to working class Black people in this city. And how we get there is we take that money from this punitive system of punishment, and we use it for things that create real safety in our communities. And that begins with material resources that belong to us. So fuck the police.
Okay. Now we open the floor for questions. So those of you on Zoom, if you have a question, please post it in the chat and it will get communicated to me. And we're gonna try to spend about the next 25 minutes with questions. So from the audience.
So there's a lot of things that I have questions about and comments about. But the one thing is going back to the propaganda. And so I actually follow the Detroit Police Department on social media, and it's pretty depressing to say the least. The remarkable propaganda campaigns that have emerged since 2020, I think we really need to be aware of the ways in which they have crafted messaging, have like if James Craig was playing the bad cop, James White is playing the good cop.
For sure.
We have daily press conferences that basically expose Detroiters to the crime that's going on, right? Like these unprecedented crime waves that are happening, seem to happen every year, even though crime continuously goes down overall, right? But there's like this fear campaign to make people so afraid of their own community that like the police are such a necessity. And so like, here come the helicopters, here come the surveillance, here
You have
come,
a question?
well, okay, so how do we, going back to the controlling the narrative, getting our narratives out, right? How do we combat and counter these propaganda campaigns that have escalated, have become they become more advanced, and they're using social media to their advantage, to the point where it's like they're also replacing the state. Like they're literally like replacing the social services that have been taken away. So now they're having athletic leagues and carnivals and come take your kid to work day and, you know, come check out this bomb squad and SWAT vehicle. So like, how do we like, we need to be able to create more vehicles and mechanisms, right, to counter these things.
Okay, I think I get your question. Tawana, do you want to start attempting the answer? Get us started with the answer?
Right, thank you. Yeah, it's really going to take amplifying the efforts that we're already engaged in. And it's not a cheap endeavor. They have, so some of the another reason why I keep bringing up Proposal P and Detroiters Bill of Rights, right? A lot of the lawsuits that are paid out, they're not even coming out of police budget, right? Like taxpayers are paying for a lot of the lawsuits that are being paid when there is situations where where we have a successful lawsuit. We have to take some of that resources that we're funding all these things and amplify and ramp up our efforts that are counter to those efforts, like a neighborhood day that happens in every community somewhere in August, right? Where you have like Shushanna Shakur has like the Restoring the Neighbor Back to the Hood backpack drive. We have all of these community initiatives that are not police, that don't have police presence. And we're doing those in our neighborhoods. Feed 'em Freedom Growers has the urban farm community event that happens all summer on the weekends, different things like that. And so it is an expensive endeavor. We have to learn how to leverage our resources, get some of those resources back that are our taxpayer dollars that are being leveraged for things that we don't want them leveraged for, so that we can amplify and pour into the efforts that we're doing, because we are doing those things. They just don't get the media attention. But when that proposal was battered down, it took away a lot of our opportunities. There's still ARPA funds in the city that we should be challenging and getting for that type of benefit in our community. And so, I mean, it's not an easy answer, but at the end of the day, we are in a narrative war, and we have been for quite some time.
We do have a question from one of our Zoom
Energized magazine.
participants. I'm sorry? What?
It said Riverwise Magazine, fund it, support it, help
okay.
distribute it, and write for it.
Riverwise. Here's the question, and this might be a question that one of the two of you could answer, or anyone on the panel. How can we rely on a legal system to help us hold police accountable when carcerality and policing is the legal system? Seems a bit counterintuitive to work for alternatives to police, but rely on the legal system to hold police accountable. That's a significant and important question, I think, but I do believe there's an answer to it. And Lloyd, you've addressed it somewhat in some of your earlier comments.
Did I?
You did, but
So I would just say this. Yeah, that's difficult. I mean, look what it took to hold George Floyd's killer accountable. It literally took the largest social movement in US history to send that, I'm not gonna say it, to jail, right? You know, to hold him accountable. Because if that didn't happen, if that video didn't happen, if that movement didn't happen, he would have probably just got another job, just like Breonna Taylor's killer did.
he'd
right?
probably still be a police
Yeah,
officer,
exactly.
actually.
And the thing is that, yeah, I mean, that's a tough thing to answer. And in terms of like the narrative, to be honest, we're not winning the narrative, to be honest. That's not happening. And to speak to Evan's point about the crime waves, it uncoincidentally, after every social movement in US history related to social justice, police brutality, civil rights, then there's a crime wave. Like anytime police legitimacy comes into question, immediately thereafter there's a crime wave. Crime wave. Crime, a social construction that is historically contingent and favors those who have access to money, power, and whiteness. And law is malleable in their favor. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question. Maybe somebody else does.
Well, I have one approach to an answer. While I don't disagree with anybody's assessment of the core problem we're confronted with, there is a way to use the legal system, I believe, by holding up the United States Constitution and taking advantage of our jury system and bring these stories to the people through jury trials. It's when these cases go to trial, when juries hear the reality of the constitutional violations that are violated on a daily basis, they get pissed off and they award massive damages that get, like you said, money speaks, and that have forced over time police departments not to reform, but at least to be forced to take some steps of accountability, however short-lived it might be. So it's an ongoing, and I think that the interplay between lawsuits and organizing, again, the point you made about George Floyd, absolutely. These cases are completely different when they are bolstered by the voice of people in the streets confronting these issues, and then being able to, and putting the pressure on the courts to actually uphold the constitutional rights of people in the face of police power. So that's one answer to this person's question.
Yeah, I have a brief statement.
Yes,
Yeah,
Alia.
just briefly. I think,
And John, you want to speak? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I think, to the extent that we don't, believe in policing being a legitimate authority, we can't believe in prison sentences administered, for road cops as a legitimate accountability mechanism. And as long as we use that as a vehicle, for punitive solutions, they're gonna use that against us.
It's complicated scenario for sure.
I don't agree with you. I think they're gonna use it against us anyways. I think they're gonna do it no matter what. Actually. Yeah.
I mean, but we're envisioning the way forward. We have to.
That's true.
I'm just saying, in terms of using, I think the problem is that concept that you were relying on the courts to achieve accountability, right? It's just part of a puzzle. It works sometimes. But what are you using the courts for, right? What you're doing it is to get truth out. And truth can be the exposure of lies, right? And we grow up like when people say they want more police, right? What they're saying is they want more safety. They have a right to safety, but they've been taught and conditioned to believe that means giving a tank to a police department, right? It has nothing to do with their safety, but they've been taught that. It's the same with courts, right? We've taught that courts are going to give you justice. Get that out of your head. You know, they can lessen the injustice, but in many ways, it's part of the process of getting truth out to people. And if the courts are not going to do justice, we want to know that. And I want to know that. I want that to be part of the case too, is if this judge is so horrible that justice doesn't play a role in their decision-making, then I want to give them every opportunity to tell the public that that's what they're about. So we can get them the hell out of there, right? Now, it's an imperfect process. It's an imperfect all this, but that's at least where I view the roles. And it can do meaningful good, particularly for an individual, right? For an individual who has been harmed, those awards mean a lot. They don't mean as much as we'd want them to be. The award should mean that that cop loses their job. That should mean that the department needs to be reformed. It needs to be downsized, but that's another step that we have to get to through different ways.
So I just want to say something. First of all, my name is Carrie McGee and I'm the chair of the Michigan Coalition for Human Rights, one of the co-sponsors, and I just want to thank everybody.
And a
here.
great civil rights attorney.
Yeah, well, you guys, phenomenal panel, really appreciate your time and your thoughts. And I just want to say about being a lawyer, I'm a civil rights lawyer. And Charles Houston once said, as an attorney, you're either a social engineer or a parasite on the universe. And the fact is that not only do we get individual victories, but through the law, we do change things. And we have done a lot of good work through the use of the Constitution, like Julie just said. And there is a lot of good things that we can do really above at the appellate level and at the Supreme Court level. We've done a lot with regard to governmental immunity and piercing that with the recent decision in the Bowserman case and the Flint case, and did a lot for juvenile justice related to the juvenile life without parolers and changing the law there, and have done a lot in changing laws associated with people who have been incarcerated. So I think there is a lot of good things we can do above and beyond with regard to the law. So I feel a little bit more positive about what can happen in that regard. But I'm going to hand this over to.
I'm kind of looking
And
at
then at the back
the
of the
time also, it's there. Probably something you already know, crime does pay. I mean, keeping the system the way it is putting money in people's pockets, not ours, but some very powerful people are making money in a capitalist system. And that is the objective of the capitalist system. And we are forced to collude. We should be France right now. They're tearing shit up over there. We're so polite and civil when we are under threat. Now, that's kind of like a psychological mind warp sort of thing. So even as we're having this conversation, the enemy is having another conversation. And they don't expect we're going to come out of here and go downtown and throw some tomatoes maybe at a few folk. Because we're not going to do that.
No, we gotta keep it peaceful. We gotta keep it real peaceful,
And so,
orderly.
you know, my question is, what I need to know is ceasefire and ShotSpotter, who specifically is funding that stuff?
I'm pretty sure ceasefire gets money from DOJ, don't they?
They have
sure
a
they do.
special line item in the city of Detroit budget.
Wow.
That's under the,
Well, they're now getting federal funding from the COVID relief package, right?
We fought that.
With-
Everybody fought that. We're not getting that.
I haven't heard that yet.
Oh, I
Pretty
thought
sure they
that's what. Oh, they did. Oh, now it's just out of the general budget.
I'm sure that when they release ShotSpotter,
Wait, Holland had his hand up and then this gentleman here had his hand up.
I just wanted to mention that we don't have a press. We don't have a counter narrative. And that's why people are basing their decisions on the information that they have, which is only the machine.
Yep. That's
Can I just say
absolutely
something
true.
to what Alina just said? That's why when I made the comment that you have to go to the national media almost any time. Not saying that the national media is great either, but anytime we wanted to amplify a cause, like making sure that everybody knew about facial recognition in the city, we did not pursue local media. We pursued national media, who then put pressure on local media, who then had to respond and talk to us. I mean, I'll give Bridge Detroit some credit that they've been doing a much better job with covering a lot of our initiatives and things. But yeah, you have to go beyond Detroit to get Detroit to pay attention to what we're doing. Right.
No, RIP Michigan citizen.
Yeah.
So, we're talking a lot about the law and organizing and what we can do and abolition. And I'm wondering where I'm feeling a dishonesty in that this state, from the Constitution, the courts, the legislature, the executive in the street, the police, its function is to suppress the proletariat on behalf of the bourgeoisie. And as long as that's the case and our conditions get worse and worse, the purpose of the police is just all the more present. And what are we saying if we're saying abolition without overthrowing this bourgeois state? And what is the mechanisms that all y'all have for prospects of doing that? And what does seizing the means of production look like today? And if there's a way to get rid of the police or to get rid of the violence that the police bring without doing that, I don't understand it. But maybe there is.
So, I mean, that's an all-encompassing question. They're asking, how do we make the revolution? How's it gonna look? You have 2 minutes, each of you.
Okay.
Okay.
You're gonna make me do this?
Well, you,
Strike.
anyone can grab
Get
the mic.
everybody you know to go on strike. Okay. I mean, I think that, yes. I mean, ultimately, huh? Yeah, exactly. Jail the rich. I don't know, take their money. I mean, we do need to seize the means of production. That's not gonna happen tomorrow. I mean, that's gonna take time, organizing, which many people have been engaged in across the country. I mean, right now, I mean, even just on a small level, my graduate student union is on strike, demanding fair wages and compensation and benefits from the University of Michigan, which, shout out to Gio for that hardship check, because I really needed that. So yeah, that's a very big question that, I don't think I'm prepared to answer in 50 seconds, but I'm with you. Okay.
To this question?
Yeah. I was just gonna say really quick, we are in the age of robot dogs, aerial surveillance vehicles, automated policing. I mean, in a minute, officers in blue will probably be automated out of jobs. And so we really do have to get a handle on the fact that our culture is being dominated, shaped, and defined by Silicon Valley. And I know that's like, sometimes people feel like that's not the same conversation, but it really is the same conversation. And so we have to have that systemic impact that we've been talking about all night and start to decolonialize the way that we operate as a society. And that's going to take, go back to the narrative, that's going to take a re-education of a lot of us, all of us really, essentially. And so we have to start, one of my comrades would always say, it's better to be an inch wide and a mile deep than a mile wide and an inch deep. And so if we're an inch wide and a mile deep, even if it was just us in this room doing deep systemic work, it's like mycelium under the earth. It starts to have a ripple impact in a way that can be sustained. Mass mobilization is amazing for raising consciousness, but it's not amazing for keeping people in the struggle in a systemic way. So we have to keep sustaining these small moments of raising our consciousness and then push the narrative so we can get more and more people thinking the way that we do.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. This is and has been a really great evening. Nancy Parker mentioned in Washtenaw County, a community-based service program being worked on, alternative to policing type of model. And I'm familiar with one in Oakland, California. And I believe there's places popping up, across Turtle Island, across the United States. One I wanted to bring attention to is Motor City Mobile Wellness, which exists now as offering wellness services to people in Detroit, but will actually be mobile in a sense of hopefully having a vehicle in the end of the year sometime. And I was wondering if people on the panel, or even if I can open it up to the audience, but know of other initiatives or projects or people trying to do similar things, because we're all working, like you were saying, similar goals on different paths. And I feel like the more we can, as this has been said also, the more we can connect and see like, oh, wow, you're already doing that and I should have your phone number kind of stuff. So Motor City Mobile Wellness at gmail.com is a good way if you have questions or want to see if you can help somehow. But yeah, I guess my question is if you know of any projects that are working towards like a resource team that can show up to like someone in mental health crisis that isn't the police.
Detroit Safety Team.
Right. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, everything we're doing is that, like literally everything. I described it in detail. I mean, I think so in terms of gun violence, y'all, 0.3% of the population is driving 70% of the violence. There is a very, very small, hugely tangible group of people that we need to wrap our arms around, support, and help them transform out of the trauma that is causing cycles of gun violence. And, you know, in love, many times they don't get invited into these rooms. I am not that person. I work in partnership with them, but I'm not that person. It'll be the people usually who have been on one side of the gun or the other, often both, because that's how cycles work, that'll drive a vision for safety forward, that are already a part of those networks, that can identify shootings that happen before they're going to happen, that can ease tensions in ways that are culturally relevant without disrupting the social norms that exist in community and without calling the police. We got to build the thing. And, you know, so donate. Get a degree in mental health and work with us.
How do people learn more
yeah.
about Force Detroit and about community violence
Intervention. ForceDetroit.org is the website. My number is on the website. I hesitate to say that, but it's my real phone number. We got to do better about our socials, y'all. I take accountability for that, but we haven't hired somebody to manage that just yet. Shout out to Maya.
Tawana and Lloyd, is there work that you're doing that people can get access to and learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see,
Detroit Will Breathe.
yeah, Detroit Will Breathe, .info. I think we still got a website. Derek, do we still got a website? Who's on the internet? Okay, somebody know? We do? Okay, we have a website. Check that out. And you can see some of the work that I'm doing with the Policing and Social Justice History Lab at the Carceral State Project's website. Yeah, I think that's all I got.
And what's the website address for the Carceral State's website?
Oh, to be honest, I don't even know. Just Google that stuff. It'll come up.
Google Lloyd Simpson, Carceral
This
State.
Carceral State project, I'm sure it will come right up, you know, algorithms and stuff, all that stuff.
Tawana, how do people learn more about the work that you are doing?
Just really quick, the ethics work regarding surveillance, artificial intelligence, et cetera. TawanaPetty.org, you can reach me there. And then other work that I do with Detroit Digital Justice Coalition. Just, you know, shameless plug, we do have a community event happening this Sunday. I put flyers out there. It is a discotheque, short for Discovering Technology. And it's a community event where you can learn more about, you know, how we create safety as and push back against the conflations between surveillance and safety, consent and coercion, because that's what we're dealing with when we get mass surveillance in our communities, and just learn other tech initiatives. And you can also skate if you know how. I don't personally, but you can skate and have free food and just be in community. And so I hope you'll join us at Akibalan Village on Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m.
I just got one comment. Coming
Of
up
course.
on Friday, I believe is the 98th birthday of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X. And Malcolm always taught us, in response to the brother's question back here, that education is the key to liberation. If a man does not know he's enslaved, then you can't liberate him from slavery. And I was remiss not to mention my brother, Chokwe Lumumba, the great revolutionary, who walked these paths. I don't think this building here, but and all of the work, the hard work that those revolutionaries did back in the 60s and the 70s, we have been set back a long way. And it was mentioned several times here tonight that people in Detroit are asking for more police. So until we educate people, then there won't be a revolution. We need to educate, then the revolution. Thank you.
Ashe, he also said the media was the most powerful entity on earth.
Julie, I know we got to wrap, but this gentleman in the back, he's had his hand up the whole time.
Sir, with the yellow baseball cap, you?
Yeah.
Yep. Sure.
What up, though, family? Sorry, I'm all the way in the back. So I'm very curious. We talked a lot about like policing in Detroit, but I mean policing outside of like other institutions that also connects us to the carceral system. So like the schools. Detroit Public Schools is one of maybe 15 districts in the country who has a police department inside of the schools that's a separate entity from the outside police, and it's ranging about like 300 mil a year that's going to that. While this year our teachers and other support staff in the schools have had funding cuts of crucial support staff like Dean of Cultures and other crucial support staff in the school from like COVID and a lot of things. So I'm really curious to know, what is the connection? Because a lot of times the school district, the direct target or, actor is like the school board and VD. And then there's like, we try to create that as a separate entity from the police that's outside in the community. But in all actuality, the school board and the city council can hold both of these entities accountable. And so I'm wondering, what does coordinated efforts look like from the community and to the schools to both eradicate? Because if we eradicate police out of the city, that means we have to eradicate the police out of the school too, because that's one of the main pipelines for funding our young people to jail, which is why right now in JDF, most of the young people inside of JDF are there for truancy, which is a school infraction. So yeah, I hope that question made sense. And yeah, thank you so much for making sure I got asked.
Oh, that's fine.
Thank you for that. There's another young man who has had his hand up quietly for some time now, so I really think he needs to have an opportunity to speak.
Can I just respond to him?
Yes.
Another thing to think about with regard to the truancy is like remote proctoring, right? A lot of people don't pay attention to the fact that it was ramped up during COVID, where our children they have to sit behind this computer screen, not make a move to the left or the right. They're being penalized, failed out of school, leveraging automated technology. And so a lot of kids were punished and criminal, like that's a direct automated school to prison pipeline situation. And so I keep bringing back the technology, but really it's systemically impacted the way that our policing has functioned in our school system. It's not just individuals anymore. So. Sorry, it's rushed. It's late.
We have this young man.
Yes. So based off a lot of the conversations that have occurred here today, it seems like there's a lot of terminology being thrown around between abolition and potential reform. And as concisely as I can put it, I understand not everybody's going to be a collegiate. I understand not everybody's going to be an organizer. And going back to my mycelium example, how do you effectively bridge the gap between people who are working inside the institution and people who are working outside to effectively mobilize and organize in our communities?
You seem to be one.
This is an exciting question. I'm so glad you asked that. Have a damn conversation with the humans in proximity to you. Like everybody is a human. Police are humans. And the people that work with police are humans. The reformists are humans. There is a baseline concern that everybody will have about the subjects. And that is all organizing. Listen, I'm an organizer through and through. And I hate for somebody to tell me they didn't have a conversation with so-and-so because they disagreed on. You disagree with what? You ain't have a conversation. So that's the basic sort of organizing fodder that helps you design a good and thorough organizing strategy. So that's just my 2 cents.
I mean, I can just give this a real quick thing. So I would say this. Number one, yeah, I do agree with that you should be having conversations. I don't politically agree with everybody. I always give liberals a really hard time, but sometimes the left and liberals work in coalition and substantive things do happen. Substantive reforms that we need to happen en route to a better world, but you also need to be willing to hold people that you're in coalition with accountable and also highlight the differences. We cannot all kumbaya all the time. We cannot just be circling around in affirmation because that does not heighten our analysis. That does not sharpen our objective. So I think that's important. And so like, yes, it is important to support people in the work they're doing. But it's also important to be critical of where that work is leading. Is that leading to a place of liberation? Is that leading to a world with limitations on police power and police brutality and police misconduct or police in schools? I mean, just speaking to that, like nobody has been criminalized more than Black youth in our city. And yeah, we got to change our priorities and make education and material needs are priorities. But yes, yeah, you should be working with whoever wants to work with you as long as there's clarity as to what their vision is. And, you know, and I think in that, you know, I found myself working with a lot of people that maybe I wouldn't, you know, I don't hang out with on a daily basis, you know. But, you know, some of these liberals, I like them. They're pretty cool.
I want to thank everyone who sat through this, both you on Zoom and everyone in the room. I think this was an extremely thoughtful and provocative conversation that we had, and we need to keep it going. And we will look forward to Alternatives to Policing Part 3, and we'll let you know when that will occur. Thank you, everyone. I do want to make one final note to this. How do those who are for reform work with those who are for abolition? I think the one really important thing for us who see a much more radical alternative or solution or future, working with those who are the reformers, I think it's really important to work with them, but always, always be sure to do everything we can to educate about why this is a good step forward, but you understand and you need to know this is only a step and it is not the solution. And let's work together, but let's always acknowledge that truth. Okay. Thank you, everyone.